I don't even know where to start, because I feel like I'm still in shock. I guess the beginning is as good a place as any. My name's Ben, and I've been married to Jennifer for 7 years. No kids. Jennifer always said she wasn't ready, and I guess that should have been my first clue. But I was too wrapped up in my work to notice. I'm in corporate sales, so I travel a lot, and lately, it felt like I was spending more time in airports and hotel rooms than at home. And Jennifer, well, she'd changed. Over the past few months, she'd become distant. Cold, even. She used to text me all the time when I was away, but recently, there were stretches of days with nothing but silence. I figured it was stress. Her job had picked up, and I thought maybe she was just tired. But deep down, I knew something was off. You know how you can just feel it? When someone pulls away from you, and you don't know why, but you can't help but wonder what's changed. Yeah, that was me. But I ignored it. I ignored the late nights she wasn't home, the half-hearted excuses about work meetings and happy hours with friends. I trusted her, because that's what you do, right? You trust your wife. And then it all came crashing down. Last week, I came back from a long business trip, 2 weeks in New York for meetings and conferences. It wasn't the kind of trip where I could fly home for the weekend, so by the time I was done, I was exhausted and just wanted to see Jennifer. We'd barely talked while I was gone, but I was telling myself that once I got back, we could reconnect. Maybe even plan a trip of our own, just the two of us. That was the plan, at least. I didn't tell her I was coming home early. I wanted to surprise her, get home a day before she expected, pick up her favorite food, and have a cozy night in. So, after my flight landed, I grabbed some takeout from that sushi place she loves, hopped in a cab, and headed straight home. The second I stepped through the door, I felt it. The house was too quiet. Usually, even if Jennifer was out, she'd leave the TV on or music playing. But this time, it was dead silent. I didn't think much of it at first, maybe she had gone out for groceries or was out with friends. I walked upstairs, hoping to drop my suitcase and surprise her when she came back. That's when I saw it. The bedroom door was halfway open, and I heard voices. A man's voice. My boss's voice. At first, I froze, my brain struggling to process what I was hearing. There was laughter, soft murmuring, and then unmistakable sounds that sent a wave of nausea through me. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might explode. But somehow, I found myself pushing the door open, and there they were, Jennifer and my boss, naked in our bed. There's no way to describe the exact moment when your entire world falls apart. It's like everything slows down, and you're watching your life disintegrate in front of you, powerless to stop it. That's what it felt like when I opened the door and saw them. Jennifer was on top of him, and they were both too caught up in each other to even notice I was standing there. For what felt like forever, I just stood there, frozen, not saying a word. My body wouldn't move, and my mind couldn't catch up to what was happening. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to make them hurt as much as I was hurting. But all I could do was stare. Then she saw me. The look on her face. I'll never forget it. Shock, guilt, fear, it was like watching a mask fall off. She scrambled off of him, grabbing the sheets to cover herself, as if that would somehow fix what I'd just seen. My boss, Steve, had this stupid, panicked look on his face, like he was caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He didn't say a word, just fumbled around for his clothes, trying to pull on his pants like this was just some awkward misunderstanding. Ben. Jennifer started, her voice trembling, but I couldn't hear her. My ears were ringing. My vision was blurry. It felt like I was outside of my own body, watching this nightmare unfold. I didn't even know what to say. What the hell do you say when you walk in on your wife's your boss in your own bed? I just left. I turned around, walked out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and straight out of the house. I don't even remember where I went after I walked out. My legs carried me down the street, but my mind was still stuck in that bedroom, replaying the scene over and over again. Every step felt heavier than the last, like I was sinking into the ground. The shock was wearing off, and in its place, a tidal wave of emotions hit me: anger, disgust, humiliation, sadness, but mostly anger. My hands were shaking, fists clenched so hard I thought I might break something. I wanted to turn around, storm back into the house, and tear them both apart. How could they do this to me? How could she? But the anger wasn't just at Jennifer or Steve. It was at myself. How had I missed the signs? The late nights, the distance, the constant excuses. Had I been that blind, or was I just too afraid to admit what I already knew? I ended up in my car, sitting in the driver's seat, just staring at the steering wheel, trying to make sense of it all. My mind was racing, but I couldn't think straight. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. That image was burned into my brain. Then, my phone started buzzing. It was Jennifer. Of course. I let it ring, then the text started pouring in. "Ben, I'm so sorry, please come back, we need to talk, it's not what you think," as if there was some explanation that could make this okay. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat and started driving. I didn't know where I was going, just away from her, away from the house, away from the life I thought I had. I drove for what felt like hours, my mind in a fog, with no real destination. It wasn't until I pulled into an empty parking lot near the outskirts of town that I finally stopped. I sat there in silence, staring out the windshield, my body still shaking with anger, but I didn't know what to do with it. That's when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Jennifer, it was Steve. My boss. The nerve of this guy. I wanted to ignore it. The last thing I needed was to hear his voice, but I knew he wasn't going to leave me alone. So I answered, and before I could even say anything, he launched into this pathetic, stammering apology. "Ben, man, listen, I'm so sorry. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I cut him off. Asterisk wasn't supposed to happen asterisk. "You're my wife, Steve. What the hell did you think was gonna happen?" He started mumbling some shit about how it just happened, that they didn't mean for it to go this far. I could feel my blood boiling with every word. I didn't want his excuses, and I sure as hell didn't want to hear about how he didn't mean for any of this to happen. "You've been sleeping with her behind my back, Steve. How long? How long has this been going on?" There was silence on the other end. He didn't want to answer, which told me everything I needed to know. I pressed him again, my voice louder this time, asterisk how long? Asterisk. Finally, he spoke. "A few months," he admitted, sounding like a child caught stealing. Since the last business trip." I was about to hang up, but then he said something that stopped me cold. "Ben, she's pregnant." My heart dropped. "What?" I managed to choke out. "She's pregnant," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "And she says the baby might be mine." I slammed on the brakes, stunned. "Pregnant? Jennifer's pregnant, we'd never talked about kids, she said she wasn't ready, said it wasn't something she saw in our future. But now she was pregnant, and there was a chance it wasn't even mine." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Steve kept talking, his voice shaky, but I barely heard him. I was too busy trying to wrap my head around the fact that while I was working myself to the bone for us, she'd been around and now there was a baby in the middle of all of this. A baby that might not even be mine. I hung up before I could say anything else. I couldn't deal with his voice, his excuses, or any of it. I just sat there, staring into the darkness, trying to figure out how my life had fallen apart so fast. I sat there, stunned, my thoughts racing. Pregnant. She was pregnant. And there was a chance it wasn't even mine. That word, asterisk pregnant asterisk, kept ringing in my ears like some sick joke. How could this be real? I tried to calm myself down, but everything was spinning. I didn't know what to do. The rage, the betrayal, the sheer disbelief, it was all boiling over, but then, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Jennifer. I didn't want to open it, but something in me couldn't resist. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before I tapped it, and there it was. Ben, there's something you don't know. Please, come home. I'll explain everything. I'm so sorry. But, it's not just Steve. It's bigger than that. Much bigger. Please come home. You deserve to know the truth. My blood ran cold. Not just Steve, what the hell did that mean? I was already reeling, and now this? I could feel a chill creep down my spine. What could be bigger than what I'd already found out? My wife, cheating on me with my boss, pregnant, and now she was telling me there was more. I didn't know whether to scream or collapse. But something about the way she phrased it, it's bigger than that, made my heart pound in a way that was different from the anger or the pain. This was something else. Something darker. Something terrifying. Against my better judgment, I started the car and turned around, heading back toward home. I needed to know. I had to know what she meant. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for a dim light in the living room. My heart was pounding as I walked up to the front door. As soon as I opened it, I saw her sitting on the couch, clutching a glass of wine like her life depended on it. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen, but she didn't look like the woman I knew. There was something different in her expression, something haunted. Ben, she started, her voice shaking. I've been lying to you for a long time, about everything. I stood there, frozen, waiting for her to continue. She put the glass down and took a deep breath. Steve isn't the only one I've been with. There's someone else. And I need you to understand that, it's not just me that's in danger now. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked me dead in the eyes, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. It's not just an affair, Ben. It's something else. I think they've been watching us. I think they're in the house. Right now. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and my blood turned to ice. Who's watching us? What the hell are you talking about? And that's when I heard it, the soft creak of a floorboard upstairs. That sound, just a single creak, echoed through the house like a gunshot. My entire body went rigid. Jennifer didn't even flinch, her eyes locked onto mine, wide and filled with something I hadn't seen in her before, raw fear. What the hell is going on, Jennifer? I demanded, my voice barely steady. She shook her head, tears welling up again. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she whispered. I thought I was in control, but I'm not. They are. And now, they're here. My heart pounded in my chest, the hairs on my arms standing on end. Who's here? I asked, my voice lowering as if someone might hear us. What did you do? She hesitated, her hands trembling as she wiped her face. It started months ago. Not just with Steve. There's someone else. Someone dangerous. I didn't know how deep I was getting into it. He knows everything about us, Ben. Everything. I tried to end it, but... Her words faded, and before I could press her, another noise came from upstairs. This time, it wasn't a creak. It was the distinct sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving across the bedroom floor. Panic surged through me. Jennifer, what the hell did you bring into our house? I whispered sharply. Her eyes darted to the staircase, and she whispered back, he's here. I couldn't stop him. The room felt colder all of a sudden, and a dread settled over me like a thick, suffocating blanket. I wanted to rush upstairs, confront whoever the hell this was, but something in her face, something about the way she looked so utterly broken kept me frozen in place. "What do you mean, he's here?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who is this guy?" Before she could answer, the footsteps stopped. Dead silence. My heart pounded louder in my ears than the stillness around us. I reached for my phone, fumbling in my pocket, ready to call the police. That's when the lights went out. Pitch black. Jennifer screamed, and I felt a cold hand brush against my arm in the darkness, like someone was standing right next to me. But we were alone in the room. Or at least, we should have been. The darkness swallowed everything. I couldn't see a damn thing, not even my hand in front of my face. Jennifer's scream cut through the black, raw and terrified. My heart was racing, and my breath felt shallow as panic tightened its grip around my chest. "Jennifer!" I shouted, reaching out, hoping to grab her, but there was nothing, just cold, empty air. Then, that feeling again. A cold hand. Brushing against my arm, lingering for just a second too long. My skin crawled, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. But I couldn't, my legs felt like they were glued to the floor. A whisper cut through the silence, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. "Ben," it wasn't Jennifer's voice. It was deeper, rougher, like something inhuman was trying to mimic a person's voice. My blood turned to ice. I staggered back, fumbling for my phone again, but before I could pull it out, the lights flickered back on, dim and eerie. Jennifer was standing across the room, her back pressed against the wall, eyes wide with terror. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. And then I saw it. At the base of the staircase, half hidden in the shadows, stood a figure. Tall, unnaturally still. A man, or at least something that looked like a man. His face was obscured by the dim light, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching, waiting. The temperature in the room dropped even further, and I could see Jennifer shivering across the room. She mouthed something at me, her eyes wide with fear. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but I didn't need to. I knew. The figure took a step forward, slow and deliberate. And then another. My pulse quickened, adrenaline coursing through me, but I was paralyzed, frozen by some force I couldn't understand. "Ben," Jennifer finally whispered, her voice trembling. "He's not going to leave. Not until he gets what he wants." I turned to her, desperate for answers. "What does he want?" Her eyes flicked to my chest, and then back to the figure. Slowly, she shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "He wants you." That's when the figure stepped fully into the light, and I saw his face, a face I recognized. It was me. A twisted, horrifying version of me, staring back with cold, dead eyes. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The figure standing at the foot of the stairs, it was me. Or something wearing my face, a twisted, distorted version of myself. His features were sharper, almost too defined, with hollow, black eyes that stared straight through me. It felt like I was looking into a funhouse mirror, except there was nothing funny about it. It was grotesque, wrong in every possible way. The thing, tilted its head slightly, like it was studying me, waiting for a reaction. I felt my stomach churn, but I couldn't look away. This thing, whatever it was, radiated something dark. I couldn't explain it, but I could feel it. It was like standing too close to the edge of a cliff, one wrong step and you'd be gone forever. "Jennifer," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What the hell is that?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," she whispered back. It came after I started seeing Steve. I thought it was just a coincidence, but then it started, following me. Watching me. And now, it's you." The figure took another step forward, the floorboards creaking under its weight, though it moved in complete silence. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst out of my chest. I forced myself to take a step back, but it mirrored my movement exactly, like a perfect reflection. "Jennifer," I said again, my voice more urgent. "How do we stop this?" She sobbed, shaking her head. "You can't. I tried everything. It wants you, Ben. It's been waiting for you." I turned back to the figure, my pulse hammering in my ears. "It wants me," the thing, stood just a few feet away now, a wicked smile creeping across its face. And then it did something that sent a chill straight down my spine. It spoke. "Ben," it whispered, its voice like mine but twisted, distorted, as if two voices were speaking at once. "Come with me. It's time." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. "Time for what?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What the hell are you?" Its smile grew wider, teeth too sharp, too perfect. "You already know," it said, its eyes narrowing. "You're not supposed to be here. You've been living on borrowed time." I felt the world tilt beneath me, a deep sense of wrongness flooding my mind. Borrowed time? What the hell did that mean? The room seemed to grow darker around me, the edges of my vision blurring as that thing, moved closer. "You were supposed to die that night, Ben," it hissed, its voice soft but dripping with malice. "The night of the crash. But you didn't. You cheated death. And now, it's here to collect." My heart stopped. The crash. The one from 2 years ago. I had walked away without a scratch, even though my car had been mangled beyond recognition. Everyone had said I was lucky, a miracle. But now, staring at this twisted version of myself, I felt that luck slipping away. "You can't escape," it whispered, its eyes locking onto mine. "You belong to me." As the room darkened, Jennifer screamed, her voice cutting through the suffocating silence. I turned to her, but before I could move, the lights flickered again, and then everything went black. The last thing I heard was that voice, my voice, whispering in the dark, "Time's up." I gasped, sitting bolt upright, my heart pounding as if it were about to break through my chest. My lungs felt like they were on fire, and the air around me was thick with smoke. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, but everything was hazy, the smell of burning metal filling my nose. Where was I? It took a moment for the world to come into focus, and then it hit me. I was still in my car. The windshield was shattered, the front crumpled against something, a tree, maybe. I couldn't tell. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white, but my body felt frozen, trapped in that surreal fog between the dream and reality. The crash. The memory hit me like a punch in the gut. After that early phone call from Steve, I had never gone home. I'd driven off, angry, distracted, and reckless. I remembered the rain slicking the roads, my mind racing with thoughts of Jennifer and the affair, and then, nothing. Just darkness. I had crashed. And everything that had happened after, the twisted version of me, Jennifer's chilling confession, the figure in the house, it had all been a dream. A nightmare, a horrific manifestation of the betrayal and fear that had consumed me in those last moments before I lost control. I coughed, trying to breathe through the smoke filling the car. My head throbbed, and when I reached up, I felt a sharp pain. My fingers came away sticky with blood. I must have hit my head during the crash. I wasn't sure how long I had been unconscious, but the engine was still hissing, steam rising from the hood in thick plumes. I need to get out of here. I fumbled for the door handle, pushing it open with all the strength I had left. The door creaked, groaning as I shoved it aside, and I stumbled out of the car, collapsing onto the wet ground. The cool air hit my face, clearing some of the fog in my head, but everything still felt surreal, like I was moving in slow motion. I forced myself to stand, swaying slightly as I looked at the wreckage behind me. The car was totaled, half wrapped around a tree on the side of the road. It was a miracle I was still standing. The dream, no, the nightmare, had felt so real. That figure, the way it spoke, the feeling of cold death creeping toward me, it had all been so vivid, so terrifying. But this was the real nightmare. The accident, the betrayal. Jennifer and Steve. That was what I had to deal with now. As I stood there, the early morning sky just beginning to lighten, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was cracked, but still working. I pulled it out with shaking hands, my heart dropping when I saw the name on the screen. It was Steve. I stared at it for a moment, my pulse racing. This time, I knew it wasn't a dream. My hands were trembling, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Everything felt too raw, too real now. The nightmare was over. But my life, my reality, it was just beginning to unravel. I stood there, phone still buzzing in my hand, staring at Steve's name flashing on the cracked screen. The surreal haze of the dream had faded, but the cold sting of reality hit harder than I expected. I ignored the call, letting it ring until it finally stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the wreckage behind me. I was still alive. Somehow, I'd survived both the crash and the nightmare. But now I had to face the real disaster, my life. I leaned against the wrecked car, trying to steady my thoughts. My mind kept bouncing between that last conversation with Steve, the haunting dream, and the broken reality waiting for me back home. Jennifer was cheating on me with my boss. My marriage was in ruins. And now, the possibility that she was pregnant, and it might not even be mine. It felt like everything was crumbling, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Steve. "We need to talk, Ben. Please call me back. There's more you need to know." More I need to know, what the hell else could there be? The man had slept with my wife, wrecked my marriage, and now he wanted to talk. My hand clenched around the phone, the anger bubbling back to the surface. But before I could react, I heard the distant sound of sirens approaching. Someone must have seen the crash or heard it happen. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and stepped away from the car, trying to gather myself. The reality of the situation was sinking in fast, and I needed to think clearly. The sirens were growing louder, and I could see the faint flash of emergency lights in the distance. But before they arrived, something in my pocket vibrated again, a notification, not a call this time. I hesitated, unsure if I could handle another message from Steve or, God forbid, Jennifer. When I pulled out my phone, I saw it wasn't from either of them. It was an email. The subject line froze me in my tracks. Truth about Jennifer. Open ASAP. There was no name attached to the email, just a random string of numbers. My heart pounded as I opened it, a cold dread washing over me. Ben. You don't know me, but I know everything about what's been going on. Jennifer isn't who you think she is. This affair with Steve is just the tip of the iceberg. She's been hiding things from you, things that are much darker than you can imagine. I've been watching them for a while now, and it's time you know the truth. Meet me tonight at 8 p.m. I'll send the location later. Trust me, you'll want to hear this. Your life depends on it. I stared at the screen, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. This wasn't some prank. The words felt too deliberate, too personal. My blood ran cold as I reread the line, asterisk, your life depends on it. Asterisk. The sirens were right behind me now, and I could see the red and blue lights reflecting off the wet asphalt. The first responders were pulling up to the scene, but I was barely aware of them. My mind was spinning. What the hell had I just stumbled into? The flashing red and blue lights filled the air, but all I could do was stare at my phone. The email burned into my brain. Jennifer isn't who you think she is, darker than you can imagine. My fingers trembled as I reread the words over and over. The affair, the lies, it was all unraveling, but now it seemed like there was something even more sinister beneath it. A paramedic was suddenly in front of me, his voice breaking through the fog. "Sir, are you okay? Can you hear me?" I nodded numbly, still clutching my phone. Yeah, I'm fine," I muttered, my voice distant. My body was in shock, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. They checked me over, asked the usual questions, but I barely registered what they were saying. The car accident felt like a lifetime ago now. The only thing on my mind was the email, the cryptic message about Jennifer, and the ominous warning, "Your life depends on it." As the paramedics worked, I couldn't help but glance back at the wrecked car. The twisted metal, the broken windshield, it all seemed like a metaphor for my life. A life that had just taken a hard turn off the edge of a cliff, and I didn't know where it was going to land. After the paramedics finished checking me out and confirmed I wasn't seriously injured, they asked if I needed a ride to the hospital. I declined. The last thing I wanted was to sit in a sterile room with too much time to think. I had bigger problems now. As they packed up their gear, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Steve, and it wasn't another message from that faceless email. It was a text from Jennifer. "Where are you? Please come home. We need to talk. I can explain everything, I swear." I stared at the message, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions crash over me. Part of me wanted to scream at her, demand answers, about the affair, about the pregnancy, about everything. But another part of me felt something deeper now, something darker. That email had planted a seed of doubt that wasn't just about cheating. What if there really was something more? Something I didn't see coming? Just as I was about to pocket the phone, another message popped up. This time, it was from the same unknown number that had sent the email. "Don't go back home yet. You're being watched. Wait for my next message. Trust me." I froze. Watched, I glanced around, suddenly feeling exposed. There were only the paramedics and cops around me, but the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I felt like I was being watched, like there were eyes on me that I couldn't see. "Sir, are you sure you're okay to leave on your own?" one of the paramedics asked, snapping me out of my thoughts. "I'll be fine," I said quickly, shoving the phone in my pocket. I had to get out of here. I couldn't just go home, not now. Not after that message. I needed answers, real ones. But first, I needed to know who the hell had sent me that email and why they seemed to know more about my wife than I did. I waved off the paramedics and police, telling them I'd call a friend for a ride. But the truth was, I had no plan. I just knew I couldn't go back home, not yet. Not until I figured out what was really going on. As I started walking away from the wreckage, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "Tonight. 8 p.m. I'll send you the address soon. Whatever you do, don't talk to Jennifer before then. She's dangerous." Dangerous, the word echoed in my head. What the hell was happening? What could be so bad that someone was warning me to stay away from my own wife? Suddenly, the nightmare I thought I'd woken up from felt like it was just beginning. I walked aimlessly, trying to make sense of everything. My head was pounding, not just from the accident, but from the growing uncertainty of what my life had become. My phone felt like it weighed a ton in my pocket. The messages, the warnings, it all seemed so surreal, but I couldn't shake the sense of dread creeping up my spine. Jennifer is dangerous, the words looped in my mind, gnawing at me. I had been angry, furious, even, about the affair, about the lies. But dangerous? That was a whole new level. And now someone was telling me not to go home, not to even talk to her. But who was this person? How could they know so much about Jennifer, about what was going on? I didn't know who to trust, or if this was some twisted joke. But deep down, something told me it wasn't. The cold weight in my gut wouldn't let me dismiss it that easily. I kept walking, not really sure where I was going, my body still aching from the crash. The streets were mostly empty at this hour, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me, feeling exposed, vulnerable. Every sound felt amplified, the shuffle of footsteps, the hum of a distant car engine, like the whole world was closing in on me. My phone buzzed again. I stopped in my tracks, heart racing as I pulled it out. Another message from the unknown number. Be ready. I'm sending the location now. A second later, the address popped up in a follow-up text. It wasn't far from where I was. A warehouse, tucked away in the industrial part of town. It looked like the kind of place where bad things happened, desolate, isolated. I hesitated. Was I really about to walk into this blind? But then I remembered the words from that first email, asterisk, it's not just Steve. There's more you need to know. Asterisk. I needed to know. I couldn't go back to my life pretending everything was okay when clearly, it wasn't. Not with Jennifer. Not with Steve. And definitely not with whatever this was. As I started toward the warehouse, I felt the weight of the unknown settling deeper on my shoulders. I had no idea what was waiting for me, but I had to find out. I reached the warehouse a little before 8 p.m. The building loomed ahead of me, shrouded in darkness except for a single dim light hanging above the entrance. The place was silent, eerie, and I felt my pulse quicken as I stood there, gathering the courage to step inside. I was about to reach for the door when my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Don't panic. Just listen. Before I could react, I heard a noise behind me, a quiet rustle, like footsteps approaching. My heart leapt into my throat, and I spun around, ready to defend myself. But what I saw stopped me cold. It was Jennifer. She was standing just a few feet away, her eyes wide and filled with something I couldn't quite place, fear, desperation. She looked like she had been crying, her face pale in the dim light. Ben, she whispered, her voice trembling. You shouldn't be here. You have no idea what you've gotten into. I stepped back, my mind racing. What the hell is going on, Jennifer? Why are you here? Are you following me? Her expression darkened, and she took a small step forward. You need to come home with me. Right now. Before it's too late. Too late for what? I shot back, my anger and confusion boiling over. First I find out you're cheating, then I get these messages about you being dangerous. Now you show up here, of all places. Her face tightened, a flicker of something unreadable passing over her features. Ben, please. You're in danger. More than you realize. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes darting toward the warehouse behind me. I turned just in time to see a shadow moving in the doorway, a figure stepping out into the faint light. It wasn't Steve. It wasn't anyone I recognized. But the sight of him made my blood run cold. Jennifer, the man said, his voice calm but with an edge that made my skin crawl. You've already made things worse. Don't make it harder on yourself. Jennifer's breath hitched, and she grabbed my arm, pulling me closer. Ben, please, she whispered frantically. You have to trust me. We need to leave. Now. But I couldn't move. I couldn't think. Because the man standing in front of me, he was holding something in his hand. A gun. The man's presence shifted the entire energy around us. His grip on the gun was firm, casual, like he was used to holding it. My pulse raced as the situation spun out of control, and I could feel Jennifer's hand tightening around my arm, her fear palpable. Ben, don't look at him, she whispered, her voice shaking. We need to go. Now. But I couldn't tear my eyes away from the man. There was something unsettling about him, like he wasn't just some random thug. He seemed deliberate, like he knew us, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Who was he? How did Jennifer know him? The man tilted his head slightly, his cold eyes locking onto mine. Jennifer always had a way of getting herself into trouble, he said with a smirk. But you. Ben, you were never supposed to be part of this. Part of what? I demanded, my voice trembling but steady enough. Who the hell are you? His smile widened, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. You can call me Daniel, he said, taking a slow step forward. But names don't matter, do they? What matters is that you're standing in the middle of something much bigger than you realize. I backed up, instinctively putting some distance between us. Jennifer was still clutching my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. Ben, please, she urged again, her voice low and desperate. You don't understand. If we don't leave now, it's over. For both of us. But I needed answers. Too much had already happened, too many secrets had been kept. I'm not going anywhere until someone tells me what's going on, I shot back, my anger and confusion bubbling over. First, you cheat on me. Then, I get cryptic messages warning me not to trust you. And now this guy shows up with a gun. I deserve the truth, Jennifer. Her face twisted in anguish, but before she could respond, Daniel chuckled softly. Oh, Ben, he said, shaking his head. You think this is about an affair? About Steve? You're missing the point entirely. Jennifer, well, she's been playing both sides for a while now. What the hell are you talking about? I snapped. He raised the gun slightly, not pointing it directly at me but letting the threat linger. Let's just say, Jennifer got involved with the wrong people. She thought she could handle it. Thought she could keep you in the dark. But now, it's too late for that. I turned to Jennifer, my mind racing. What is he talking about? What the hell have you been hiding from me? Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a brief moment, she looked like the woman I had once trusted, vulnerable, terrified, and completely broken. Ben, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I thought I could control it. But it's spiraled out of control. Please, we have to leave before. Before what? I interrupted, the anger boiling over. Before he kills us. Asterisk before they come asterisk, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel's smile faded, and his gaze sharpened. You should have listened to her, Ben. Now, they're already on their way. A sudden, deafening noise erupted in the distance, an engine, growing louder by the second. My heart pounded as I realized what was happening. Someone was coming. Jennifer's grip tightened on my arm, and I could feel her panic rising. Ben, we don't have time. We need to run, now. But before I could move, the warehouse door behind Daniel slammed open, and two more figures appeared, their faces hidden in the shadows. They moved quickly, with purpose, and I could feel the weight of their presence like a tidal wave crashing over us. Daniel glanced back at them, his smirk returning. Looks like you're out of options, Ben. My mind was racing, adrenaline pumping through me. I was trapped. No way out. But then, in one last surge of desperation, I grabbed Jennifer's hand and whispered, "Run." Without waiting for a response, we bolted. I could hear Daniel shouting behind us, the pounding footsteps of the new arrivals chasing us down. But we didn't stop. We tore through the dark alley behind the warehouse, the sound of gunshots ringing out, barely missing us. My lungs burned, my legs screaming as we sprinted into the night, the cold air slicing against my skin. Jennifer was gasping beside me, her fear driving her forward. I didn't know where we were going, or how long we had before they caught up with us. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever this was, whatever she had gotten us into, it was far worse than I had imagined. We ran until my legs could barely carry me. The alley twisted and turned, leading us farther away from the warehouse, from Daniel, from whatever nightmare I had stumbled into. I could still hear distant shouts and footsteps echoing behind us, but for a moment, we were safe. Or so I thought. Finally, we stopped, panting, gasping for air. I turned to Jennifer, her face pale and streaked with tears. She was trembling, and I could see the fear in her eyes, but there was something else too, something darker. She had been hiding so much from me, and I wasn't leaving this alley without answers. "Tell me the truth, Jennifer," I demanded, my voice hoarse. "No more lies. What the hell have you gotten us into?" Her eyes darted around, looking for a way out, but there was none. She was cornered, just like me. She took a deep breath, and then the words started pouring out, words that shattered everything I thought I knew. "I was working for them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "For Daniel and the others. I started when you were gone on those long trips. At first, it was just to make some extra money, but then it got deeper. They offered more, and I couldn't say no." I felt my stomach twist in disgust. "Offered more? What do you mean, Jennifer?" Tears streamed down her face, and she couldn't meet my eyes. "I worked as an escort, Ben." She swallowed hard, the shame in her voice thick. "I was a prostitute. And Steve, your boss, he was one of my clients." The world seemed to tilt, my mind reeling. All the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The late nights. The secrecy. Steve's involvement. The cold realization hit me like a sledgehammer. Jennifer had been working behind my back, selling herself to men like Steve while I was out there, killing myself for our life together. My voice shook as I forced the words out. "And the baby?" She closed her eyes, sobbing. "I don't know who the father is, Ben. It could be yours. It could be Steve's. I didn't plan for this. I was going to leave everything behind, disappear before anyone found out. But you came home early. You caught us. And now, it's all falling apart." I stood there, numb. The betrayal, the lies, the sheer magnitude of what she had done, it was too much to process. I wanted to scream, to cry, to hurt something, but all I could do was stand there in shock. The woman I thought I loved, the life I thought we had, it had all been a lie. Jennifer looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I'm so sorry, Ben. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just..." "Stop," I cut her off, my voice hollow. "It doesn't matter anymore." I turned away, the weight of everything crushing down on me. There was no going back, no fixing this. The woman I had married was gone. What was left of her wasn't someone I could love, wasn't someone I even knew. In the distance, I could still hear the faint sounds of pursuit. But I didn't care anymore. Let them come. Let them take whatever they wanted. The worst had already been done. I divorced Jennifer not long after that night. I never looked back. She tried to reach out, to explain, to ask for forgiveness. But there was nothing left to say. The marriage had been poisoned from the start, and I was done. Steve. I quit my job, cut all ties with him. Last I heard, his life fell apart too. I didn't care. The nightmares, though, they stayed. That twisted reflection of myself from the dream, the sense of betrayal and death lingering over me. It haunted my nights, crept into my days. I couldn't shake it. So, I started seeing a therapist. It's been months now, and I'm still working through it. The rage. The hurt. The questions that will never have answers. But I'm healing. Slowly. There's no neat ending to a story like this. No final revelation that makes it all better. But I've learned to live with it. To understand that sometimes, the people we trust the most can be the ones who destroy us. I'm moving forward, one day at a time. The past is a dark, twisted place, and I'll never forget what happened. But I've decided not to let it define me. Not anymore.